evening, everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. Just this daggum time change is killing me.
Oh, man, you and me both, man. I was up till 4 o'clock in the morning the other night, just laying in bed, wide ass awake after the time change. I'm like, I know I should be asleep right now, but I just cannot go to bed.
This flipping time change.
It's messed with all of us. Do you know how upset I was to learn that I lost an hour worth of rewriting time?
Oh my God. You were super upset.
And how in the world did I end up with episode 123?
That is interesting. I don't know.
Really?
Oh, no.
I guess it had to go to somebody, right?
I guess it did.
So, guys, our topic tonight is over the crying boy and the curse of the crying boy specifically. So have you guys heard anything about the crying boy? Do you know anything about him or about his story?
I know a little bit, but I know that you did a real deep dive into this, and you even found out some stuff that you didn't know.
I did. I found some interesting things.
I know enough just to get me in trouble. We'll put it that way. But this is a very interesting topic to me. I always love cursed objects.
I do too.
Because it really makes you kind of start thinking whenever you start throwing in the stories, the elements of the story, like, oh, I don't believe in curses. And you're like, wait a minute. Could this be cursed? Right. So yeah, I love me some cursed objects.
Well, then let's get right into talking about the curse of the crying boy. So throughout history, unexpected events have often been interpreted as omens, both good and bad. In daily life, we encounter numerous situations that pique curiosity or might evoke a sense of fear. If the situation is traumatic or ongoing, it might lead one to believe that they might have been cursed. In folklore, a picture falling from a wall is an omen of impending death, particularly if it's a portrait. And this remains one of the most widespread modern superstitions. Now, a skeptic might argue that the picture was poorly mounted or had faulty construction. But those not willing to tempt fate heed the mystical warning of potential danger and misfortune, and at least for that day, are more cautious about their decisions and actions. Perhaps because pictures hold emotional significance, moments frozen in time that you want to remember. Some cultures believe that a picture captures the soul of the subject and trapping part of them forever. Fear and anxiety continue to surround a series of eerie portraits that literally blazed a trail across England, prompting them to be labeled as cursed. Now, late in the evening, in a home in Rotherham, England, the house succumbed to a fire. The living room was charred black. Curtains and furniture were reduced to ashes. The owners of the home, Ronald and May Hall, lost nearly everything in the blaze, except for one item, a painting of a crying boy that hung on their living room wall. The picture had fallen from the wall during the fire, and only the frame was just slightly charred. The picture itself, completely undamaged, not even blackened by smoke. And as the Halls stared at the destruction, the boy in the picture with his tear-stained face and wide eyes stared back at them from the debris. And the couple became convinced that the painting was cursed and that it was to blame for the destruction of their home.
Well, yeah.
And so they lost everything else, just that.
Everything else was gone.
Okay.
Except for that.
Okay.
So in 1985, an article in the Sheffield Star newspaper reported that fire, and that they reported that the fire had burned to the ground. And it might just have been skimmed over or gone relatively unnoticed to readers, but the title of the article grabbed attention. The fire was allegedly caused by a curse. Columnist John Murphy wrote, "Family hit by a curse." The distraught Hall family and the from Swallownest believe the curse of the crying boy print has struck their home. Their original home in Pagenall Drive, Swallownest, was wrecked by fire, and they are kicking themselves for not following the advice of a fireman relative who had told them to get rid of the framed print of the little boy crying. Ronald Hall's brother, Peter, works at the Erskine Road fire station, and he told the family that every house fire he's been called to, there's been the same sad print. When he told us, we just laughed, said 53-year-old May Hall. It's not going back in the house, it's going in the bin. It's a lovely print, but it's got to go. I'm not superstitious, but this makes you wonder, added May. The print was not damaged in the blaze, and May said this was the case with the other prints that had been in fires. Ronald Hall, a 59-year-old redundant miner, said, I want to burn it to make sure it doesn't come back, and if I found out who painted it, then I'll sue him.
Okay.
The house suffered extensive smoke and heat damage after a chip pan full of fat started the blaze. The kitchen was completely gutted. The Hall's 25-year-old son, David, was trying to cook chips when the fire started, and the Keefton Park colliery fitter said, it was very frightening, and I'm upset about the whole thing. David burnt his hands when he tried to put out the fire with a damp towel, but he has not been detained at the hospital, and the Halls are now having to stay with relatives. So that is the entirety of the story. So now if you don't know what a chip pan is, because I had to look this up, what it is it's basically a pot.
Okay.
That you basically fill with oil and you lower it down and you put your French fries in it, basically. Mm-hmm. So he had that full of oil, lowered something into it, and it caught on fire. But instead of that being blamed, then he tries to put it out with a wet towel. Well, you don't put out grease fires with towels, wet towels especially.
No.
You put them out with flour, right?
Yeah.
Or fire extinguishers.
Do not dump water on it. Whatever.
So he was up in the kitchen with the fry daddy.
Exactly.
And
exactly.
So this is why we have fry daddies.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. Hey, I love my fry daddy.
So,
man, I went to a wedding one time, and I swear to God, every gift was a fry daddy to somebody.
Now, normally this would have been the end of the story, but it found its way to Kelvin McKenzie, legendary editor of the Sun newspaper tabloid. And during the mid-1980s, the Sun was engaged in a battle for readers with its Fleet Street rival, the Daily Mirror. The war was wicked, and both papers were more tabloid than news, like a cross between People magazine and the Weekly World News. That was their genre. But both fought for readers with salacious headlines and sometimes outlandish stories, and neither let the accuracy or believability interfere with providing a good story. Uncanny, strange, and supernatural events were served to the public, and they devoured every morsel. The story of the crying boy arrived at a time when Mackenzie was on the lookout for what journalists called a great splash. Now, what a splash meant to Mackenzie was that it was an exclusive story that none of his rivals would ever dream of publishing first, and that it would ripple out and not only retain readers, but siphon off a few from his competitor. His moment of genius was to spot the potential of the story buried in the routine copy from a regional news agency. And after reading the story, he confidently announced to his staff, "This one's got legs." That was his phrase for a story that would run and run and run. On September 4th of 1985, British residents opened their copies of The Sun to find an astonishing story. That on page 13, a story headlined, "Blazing Curse of the Crying Boy," and it told how Ron and May Hall blamed the cheap painting of a crying toddler for a fire that gutted their terraced council home in Rotherham, a mining town south of Yorkshire. And according to the story, the blaze broke out in a chip pan in the kitchen at their home of 27 years, and it spread rapidly, destroying the downstairs room of the home, and everything was gone. But the framed print of the crying boy escaped unscathed, and it continued to hang there, undamaged and surrounded by a scene of devastation.
Okay, so this is another one.
This is how Kinsey rewrote that story.
Ah, gotcha. Okay.
Oh, okay,
So
gotcha.
the same story.
Okay.
Mhm.
He found in the local paper, and he rewrote. This is how he rewrote it for the Sun.
He
Gotcha,
punched it up a
okay.
little bit. Yeah.
Right. And normally a grease fire would merit nothing more than a couple of paragraphs in a local paper.
Right.
But what transformed this story into a page lead in Britain's leading tabloid was the intervention of Ronald Hall's brother, fireman Peter Hall, based in Rotherham. Peter Hall stated that he had witnessed many fires in which everything was ruined except for the Crying Boy painting. The response to this article was overwhelming. And within a day, hundreds of readers had reached out to the newspaper claiming to be jinxed by the painting. On September 5th, the very next day of 1985, a follow-up article was written with the headline, Curse of the Crying Boy, and it showcased new and terrifying stories that readers claimed to be victims of the curse. And the stories, they were harrowing. They included fires and injuries and deaths. Some accounts included supernatural occurrences as well. Some readers alleged that they saw the print sway from side to side before settling back against a wall before a fire started. Some claimed that after a fire and they had disposed of the painting, that the painting returned to its original spot in the home. Deborah, a magical painting.
It's like the Christine of paintings.
Exactly. Now, Deborah Mann from Mitcham, Surrey, claimed that her house was gutted 6 months after she bought the print. Sandra Caskey of Kilburn, North Yorkshire, claimed she, her sister-in-law, and a friend had all suffered disastrous fires after acquiring copies of the print. Brian Parks of Nottingham blamed the print for a blaze which left he and his family homeless. His wife and 3 children needed treatment for smoke inhalation at the hospital. He said he had destroyed the copy, but when he returned from the hospital, he found it hanging undamaged on the blackened wall of his living room.
Oh, no. See, all this. No, just get rid of it. Just go ahead and burn the rest of the house down with it inside.
House was gone. The picture was fine.
Either that or somebody's playing a really good joke on these people.
That it's all these different locations, you know?
True.
But the ones that get me are they're like, talk about a case of mass hysteria. Let's be honest here. You know, like I saw it swaying and then the kitchen went up in smoke. No, Edgar probably bumped it on the way to catch his, put out the Fry Daddy fire. Like, I mean,
now you are not far off of some theories.
Let me ask you, and maybe if I'm jumping, forgive me. Do we know that this painting is not made of some sort of fire-resistant material?
We'll get to that.
Okay.
So now this tale would have disappeared into the archives of the strange and mysterious stories that littered the pages of the Sun, except for one other thing. Firefighter Peter Hall, that was quoted, and he had said that there were at least 15 fires. Among the charred rubble was always the remaining print of the Crying Boy.
Right.
And he then said that unscathed copies of Crying Boys had been found frequently at scenes of fires. He and his colleagues were serious enough about this to vow to never allow the paintings into their own homes.
And this is a firefighter.
This is still the brother. The brother's kind of yappy. Okay. Now, the Sun also included commentary from fire station officer Alan Wilkinson, and this is Peter Hall's associate. Wilkinson claimed that he had documented over 50 fires dating back to 1973, where the picture of the Crying Boy was the only thing left undamaged. Wilkinson, who had 33 years of experience, had said he wasn't superstitious and was satisfied that most of the fires had been caused by human carelessness. But despite his pragmatism, he could not explain how they had survived the inferno, which generated heat sufficient to strip plaster from walls. Now, Wilkinson's wife, she had her own theory. She said, I always say it's the tears that put out the fire.
She did not.
Now, the Sun was definitely not interested in finding a rational explanation. And it ignored Wilkinson's comments and claimed fire chiefs had admitted they have no logical explanation for a number of recent incidents. That was what they ran with.
Wait, Ryan, do the voice. Fire chief.
Fire chiefs reveal they have no explanation for for supernatural incidents.
Yeah. See, I can't do it as good as you can, but that's what I was going for. Thank you, Ryan.
You're welcome.
So the article in the Sun carried a photograph of the popular print signed by G. Bragolin, and they captioned it, "Tears for Fears, the portrait that firemen claim is cursed." Wilkinson had not used the word cursed. But nevertheless, the newspaper report said that they gave the story a certain level of credibility. Just the fact it was firefighters gave this story legs, and it was able to run. The paper then added that an estimated 50,000 crying boy prints signed by G. Bergolin were sold in British department stores, particularly in the working class areas of northern England. And examples could be seen hanging in living rooms of family homes across England. Now, readers were left with an overwhelming impression of a supernatural link. Words and phrases used like cursed, feared, and jinxed were laden with sinister feelings of foreboding. And the stories just kept accumulating. With new details emerging, it just encouraged the idea that the prints might actually be possessed, putting the owners at risk of fire and serious injury. A lady from London claimed that she had seen her print swing from side to side on the wall before her fire. Another said that after she bought the picture, her 11-year-old son had caught his private parts on a hook.
What the what?
And that is a
trigger
quote.
Warning.
Yes.
Woo.
Miss Rose Farrington of Preston, in a letter published by The Sun, wrote, quote, "Since I bought it in 1959, my 3 sons and my husband have all died. I've often wondered if I had a curse." Now, another reader attempted to destroy 2 of the prints by fire, only to discover they would not burn. Her claim was tested by security guard Paul Collier. Paul tossed one of his 2 prints into a bonfire, and despite being left in the flames for over an hour, the print didn't even scorch. He told The Sun, "It was frightening. The fire wouldn't touch it. I really believe it is jinxed. We feel doubly at risk with 2 of these in our home, and we're determined to get rid of them." The Perillo Pizza Palace in Great Yarmouth burned to the ground and laid blame on the picture of the crying boy. An explosion destroyed the home of the Amos family. They had 2 crying boy prints, and both were retrieved unharmed.
What the hell?
What?
Now, 61-year-old William Armitage of Avon died in a house fire, which the room was gutted. Firefighters found his charred body, and next to him, an unscathed picture of the crying boy, leading the fireman to only be quoted as saying, "It was extremely odd."
What?
Who wants one?
Yeah. Hell no. I believe, I mean, if it don't burn, just take it to the damn garbage can and put it on the curb.
So all of these so far that you've been telling us about, I mean, these rooms where these paintings are at are just decimated by fire.
Right.
Reduced to rubble.
And don't forget, Paul Blart Mall Cop tried to burn one too. So
and yet in every single instance, the only thing left
is this painting.
Right.
Now,
That's
soon
so
after
weird.
it was discovered that the cursed prints were not all copies of the same painting.
Oh, okay.
They weren't even all prints from the same artist. The Rotherham fire that literally sparked the story was signed by G. Bergolin, who The Sun claimed was an Italian artist. Some of the other prints associated with the fires were painted by a Scottish artist named Anna Zinkesian. Her print of the crying boy became the center of the next mysterious fire reported by The Sun. It allegedly destroyed a house in Rotherham. The story quoted the fire brigade spokesman, reassuring the owners of the print that although there was no cause for alarm, these incidents are becoming more frequent.
You think?
The only common denominator was that they were all cheap, they were all mass-produced prints, and they were sold in great numbers in the 60s and the 70s. But the widespread anxiety that the story generated prompted the South Yorkshire Fire Service to issue a statement which aimed to debunk the connection between the fires and the prints. They pointed to discarded cigarettes, overheated chip pans, and faulty wiring as reasons for the fire, not some supernatural curse. Chief Divisional Officer Mick Riley, pointed out that the most recent blaze was started by an electric fire, which would be considered a heater, was started by a heater left too close to the bed. He also stated that a large number of prints had been sold, and any connection with the fires is purely coincidental. Fires are not started by pictures or coincidence, but by careless acts and omissions. Then Riley revealed the service's own explanation. The reason why this picture has not always been destroyed in the fire is because it is printed on high quality, high density hardboard, which is very difficult to ignite. At last, a voice of reason in a storm of hysteria.
Yeah.
Okay.
However, the fire service's statement failed to have much effect in dousing the flames on which the sun was happily stoking. The journalist turned to experts in the field of folklore and the occult for a more suitable explanation.
Yeah, let's disregard the scientific explanation.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Let's jump straight to the paranormal, peeps.
Right.
So when a journalist approached Folklore Society member Georgina Boyes, the interview floundered when she refused to provide a suitably satanic explanation for the fires.
That's my new band name.
Suitably satanic.
Suitably satanic. Yep.
And according to Georgina, the journalist ended the interview and went off in search of a witch or somebody in the occult who might make a better headline.
Okay, but wait.
Yeah.
I have a better headline in the comments. Somebody just said, hear me out. One wild story from the sun created one big crazy egregore.
That could, I mean, yeah, possibly.
Well,
that's a pretty damn good theory.
There you go. So, the secretary of the Folklore Society, Roy Vickery, he weighed in by speculating the original artist might have mistreated the child model in some way. All these fires could be the child's curse and his way of getting revenge. So this guy was willing to go, let's go supernatural angle, trapped soul getting revenge. Now, for 6 weeks, stories about the crying boy flooded the pages of the Sun, and with each story published, the frenzy and hysteria grew, and the legend grew bigger, and imaginations ran wild. By the end of October, panic had reached an all-time high, and people became desperate to get rid of their copies of the painting, and many looked to the Sun for an answer and to solve their problem. Now, editor Kelvin McKenzie came up with an idea and announced the solution in a column of the paper. Enough is enough, folks, announced McKenzie to his readers. If you're worried about a crying boy picture hanging in your home, send it to us immediately. We will destroy it for you, and that should see the back of any curse. Send them in, and we will do the job for you.
Okay.
That was what was in. And if you have one hanging in your home, and that's all capitalized in the column. Within days,
I was just going to say, you don't think that there's these people who are like, we have 2 of them, and there was an explosion at our neighbor's house who also had 2 of them. But yes, please send us thousands of copies of this thing.
Just a truck carrying crying boy paintings explodes on the highway. What
And within days, the Bovary Street office of the Sun was swamped. Crying boy paintings were soon stacked 12 feet high in the newsroom, spilling out of cupboards and entirely filling a little-used interview room. Readers had sent over 2,500 copies of the print to the newspaper offices. Now, what in the hell was McKenzie supposed to do with all that?
My God, we're sitting on a powder keg.
Up to that point, McKenzie's staff couldn't quite figure out how much credence their boss had attached to this story. He'd always denied being superstitious, and just for fun, the paper's assistant editor took down the picture of Winston Churchill, which had been hanging in the newsroom since the Falklands War, and replaced it with a crying boy painting. The mystery was solved when McKenzie, bustling into the newsroom on his normal half run, stopped dead in his tracks and went white. "Take that down," he snapped. "I don't like it. It's bad luck."
But, sir, we have
2,500 copies of them.
We have like 2,499. Just take a look behind the green curtain, sir.
You'll love this, sir.
So the editor didn't even want one hanging in his building. Now, at the end of this 6-week Crying Boy campaign, Mackenzie had to dream up a suitable way to dispose of over 2,500 copies of this painting that was sent in by the readers. And then he came up with another stroke of genius. He decided to destroy the paintings in a bonfire. His initial plan was to burn them on the roof of the paper's Bovary Street offices.
What? Hold on.
What time?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was that. Trust me, that was quickly vetoed by the
Yeah.
London and Thames fire brigades.
Of course. Let's burn paintings on the roof of a paper. There's paper everywhere. Let's
that talk about sitting on a fucking powder keg.
Yeah.
Damn.
Let's put cursed paintings that won't burn on top of a whole bunch of paper. Yeah.
Yeah.
So the London and the Thames fire brigades very quickly went, no, sir.
Are you
No,
daft?
Yeah, are you daft? Are you daft, man? And both refused to cooperate and denounced the whole campaign as a cheap publicity stunt. But Mackenzie was determined to have his event, and he decided to hold the massive bonfire near the Thames River on Halloween.
Oh, of course.
That's cool.
Of course. I mean, yeah, that's cool, but like
this guy's brilliant. He's brilliant.
Yeah. That's what. At least you're close to a water source. Should it get out of hand, you can do something.
Yeah. The night of the event, reporter Paul Hooper, along with a photographer and Page 3 girls in tow, left the paper's headquarters with 2 van loads of prints. Now, if you don't know what a Page 3 girl is, in the Sun, there on Page 3, there was always this local beauty who was usually topless. She had a centerfold right in the middle of the Sun paper. Yeah, no, not naked, just topless. But anyway, just kind of like whatever.
Ryan's like, she was Nikki.
So old Paul Hooper, to cover the story for the Sun, went ahead and brought along some Page 3 girls. Who knows? Maybe they get topless. So they loaded up the two van loads full of prints, and they headed out to this bonfire. In a highly publicized event on Halloween, the paintings were doused with an accelerant and set alight, and they burned under the supervision of the fire brigade. The photographer snapped a picture of a scantily clad, red-hot Page 3 beauty Sandra Jane Moore tossing pictures into a bonfire as bemused firemen look on. So the Page 3 girl got into on the mix.
Did something happen to her afterwards?
I don't know. I did not follow her story.
Okay.
So as the bonfire blazed on the River Thames, the curse released its hold, dissolving into smoke. The Sun put out an article with the headline, "Crying Flame. Sun nails curse of the weeping boy for good." The story claimed the curse was ended once and for all. They even printed a reassuring quote from one of the police officer's chaperones in which he stated, "I think there will be many people who can breathe a little easier now." Strangely enough, not one picture remained. All were destroyed by the fire.
Okay, wait. Oh,
all right.
Do we know? You may not have looked up to that. Do we know if any of the paintings that were brought to this bonfire were part of any that the houses had burned down previously?
Oh, I do not know that. I do not know.
Well, we also said, if you remember earlier in the earlier in the story, where they said they used an accelerant. We don't know what kind of accelerant they use because certain things burn hotter. Maybe that accelerant burns hotter and is able to engulf those things in flames when the house fires were not able to. Does that make sense?
Very possible. Very possible.
Very true. Yeah.
That could be a deciding factor. The Halloween burning was widely believed to have exorcised the curse of the crying boy, and the number of tabloid stories began to decrease. And as tabloid interest waned, the crying boy stories began to morph into nothing more than a modern legend. But questions still remained. Who was the child in the picture or pictures? Who was the artist? And why was the child so sad? Now, the Crying Boy was one of a series of paintings by artist Giovanni Bragolin that he completed in the 1950s. All of the paintings in the series depicted children with tears streaming down their faces. The prints of these paintings were popular worldwide and were sold at department stores like Woolworths, and they sold over 50,000 in the UK alone. But the artist, himself is shrouded in mystery. Giovanni Bergoglin allegedly was born in 1911 in Italy and fought in World War II on Italy's side. Okay, history buffs, if you don't know, that was the wrong side to be on.
Oh, yeah.
That's the wrong side.
110%. Yeah.
It's thought that the suffering of children influenced his artistic direction. Perhaps it was some kind of guilt he was trying to release. Attempts to trace the artist were unsuccessful, as art historians said he did not appear to have a coherent biography. Oh, and one more thing. Giovanni Bergoglin didn't exist.
What?
Tom Sleeman attempted to research the artist for his book series titled Haunted Liverpool. Sleeman's books are presented as nonfiction, but they're largely unreferenced and really lack solid documentation. Allegedly, Tom Sleeman discovered a story from a well-respected, and this is in quotation marks, well-respected occult researcher and retired schoolmaster from Devon named George Mallory in 1995. Okay, history buffs, one more time. George Mallory is also the name of the famed UK mountaineer who disappeared on Mount Everest. Just so you know, okay?
He ain't telling nobody nothing.
Yeah. Anyway, retired teacher. Sorry, I just laughed. Retired teacher George Mallory claimed that he had found and spoken with the artist known as Giovanni Bergoglin. And he had been told the entire story of the artist, the paintings, and the boy. So this is the story that was told. Giovanni Bergoglin was a pseudonym for the Spanish-born portrait artist named Bruno Amadio. Amadio had several aliases and also painted under the name of Franchot Seville. Some stories claim it's the other way around, that Seville was the given name and Amadio was another alias.
Oh, God.
But regardless, he never signed the Crying Child paintings with his real name because, to be honest, he was embarrassed by them. He didn't feel as if they were his best work. He sold the paintings to tourists as a reminder of the orphans of World War II. Oddly enough, people in England, especially young couples, grew fond of these paintings. And Amadio painted over 60 portraits. Some say 60, some say 65, some say it could be more in the 80s or 90s. Let's go with 60 and say 60 plus pictures.
Okay.
So he painted over 60 portraits in the Crying Boy collection from the 1950s through the 1980s. And mass prints were sold everywhere. And as the story goes, he signed them with the name of his uncle, Giovanni Bergoglin, who was allegedly also a painter. And let me tell you, he must have painted houses because I could not find him on any art registry, okay?
Wait. He painted houses or
I don't know.
Heard he painted houses?
I don't know. I couldn't find him on any art registry. Even art historians say the name Giovanni Bergoglin does not exist. This artist, this man, this painter does not exist. He's not in any art history registers. Okay. So if he was really a painter, he had to have been painting houses somewhere where they didn't keep track of it. I don't know.
I made a really, really good mom joke. Shelley should have been proud of. But no. Continue with your fabulous story.
Thank you. So all of this satisfied George Mallory, the retired schoolmaster. And then the retired teacher questioned, who we're going to call Amadio now. We're going to call him Amadio because that's supposed to be his given name.
Okay.
He questioned Amadio about the child. And the story goes like this. In 1969, the artist was painting in Madrid and saw a child about 12 years old crying on the steps of a church. The sadness in the child's eyes captivated the painter. The expression was sad and beautiful at the same time. He began to paint the child's portrait, and as he worked, he noticed that the child never spoke. While he was working, a Catholic priest approached to ask what he was doing, and the artist explained that the young boy's sad eyes seemed to reflect his soul, and it tugged on the heartstrings of the artist. The priest then told the story of his own. The child's story was truly tragic. His parents had died in a mysterious fire, leaving him an orphan. The child's name was Don Benillo, and the priest had found the child wandering the streets, crying but unable to speak. The little boy was taken in by the church, and every effort was made to ease the child's suffering, but he just continued to cry. Shortly after, there were a series of fires that started in various areas of the church. Now, no one was sure who started them or even how they started, but many laid the blame on little Don Benillo. No one in the village wanted to take in the child for fear of the consequences of their kindness. It seemed wherever the child went, fires soon followed. The members of the church and the village were so convinced that some had started calling the little boy El Diablo, the devil.
That's fucked up.
Yeah.
The priest gave a stern warning and advised the artist to move on and have nothing to do with the child, because wherever he settled, fires of unknown origins would mysteriously break out.
That's a bullshit. I'd take him and he'd just be my little fire starter. That's what he would be.
But Bruno Amadio, Bergolin, whatever, could not ignore the child. Against the priest's advice, the painter took the child in. He brought Don Benillo home to live with him and created the Crying Boy series of paintings. And for a while, the artist considered little Don Benillo his good luck charm. Everything was going well. His paintings were selling and his work was gaining popularity. But the unique relationship between the painter and his favorite subject came to a sudden and fiery end.
Oh.
Amadio's studio and apartment mysteriously caught fire, and everything in it was lost. He remembered the priest's warning and accused the child of arson and kicked him out. Don Benillo ran away in tears, and Bruno Amadio never saw him again. Then the story of the curse of the crying boy hit the Sun newspaper. From all over Europe came requests of the unlucky crying boy. Came reports of the unlucky crying boy paintings causing places. The artist was regarded as a jinx, and he was ruined. No one commissioned him to paint. No one would even look at his paintings. The Crying Boy series was the only artwork of Amadio's that saw success. However, it was a double-edged sword. The images depicting the horror, suffering, and despair of the innocent brought about speculations of abuse. Some questioned whether or not Amadio significantly frightened the children, terrified them, and then painted them. And this led to speculation that perhaps Bruno Amadio was the devil himself, the real El Diablo of the story. The artist had been destroyed by his creation. Now, in 1976, the police responded to a report of a car crash on the outskirts of Barcelona. The car had exploded after crashing into a wall and was engulfed in flames. Once the fire was out, the officers discovered the body of the driver burned beyond recognition. As the police searched the car, they discovered a few scraps of paper in the glove box that had survived the flames. One of those scraps was a part of a driver's license, and upon examination, the name on the license was that of 19-year-old Don Benillo.
No.
He was the only one in the car at the time of the crash.
Oh, wow.
Died in a fire.
Wow.
That's very interesting.
Now, according to journalist David Clark, who researched the Crying Boy legend for the 14 times, and I'm guessing it's 14, it's F-O-R-T-E-A-N, or 40N maybe. I'm going to guess on that because I really don't know. This legend has more than a few holes. Clark could find no evidence that George Mallory, the retired teacher, or Don Benillo, the child, ever existed. Also, the Crying Boy curse was not exclusive to the Bergolin Amadio Seville paintings. Anna Zakishian's series of crying children paintings were regarded as equally cursed. He also discovered that the paintings were printed on compressed board, making it difficult to burn, which is what the firefighters told the press in 1985. But sometimes you got to tell them, then you got to tell them again.
Right.
In 2011, comedian and writer Steve Punt also explored the legend on his show, Punt PI. The worst name for a show ever. Punt PI. What are you watching tonight, Punt PI? Sounds like a... Never mind. Now, Mr. Punt, be careful how you say that. You got to make sure I pronounce that correctly. He wanted to test the myth of the nearly unbelievable ability of the paintings to resist fire. And he bought a crying boy picture for himself. After being inexplicably delayed to his destination several times, Punt began to feel a little nervous about the possibility that the painting might actually be cursed.
Mm-hmm.
He took the picture to the Building Research Establishment, the BRE, near Watford. There, Punt and construction researcher Martin Shipp attempted to set the painting on fire. Other than the string breaking in the fire, they found that the picture didn't really burn. The lapel of the boy's jacket was singed and the painting suffered a hole, but otherwise there was very little damage. The men surmised that the picture must have been coated with a fire retardant varnish. Now, Tina Booth, owner of a crying boy painting, claimed that the art caused 2 fires in her home. And so what do? You bring it to Zach Bagans so he can put it in his cult museum.
Oh.
Yes, okay. She gave it to...
There's one of those out there.
Well, I was going to say, I guess I didn't realize he had one in his museum.
Yes, it is housed in the Zach Bagans Occult Museum in Las Vegas, Nevada. The painting is featured in season 1, episode 5 of the series Deadly Possessions, where Tina turns over the picture.
Okay.
Now, in 2012, the series Weird or What with William Shatner examined the legend of the paintings. Season 3, episode 4 enlisted the help of Michael Gollner, a fire researcher at the University of California in San Diego, to help and explain the mystery. Gollner explained that a painting surviving a house fire is not as unusual as one might think, and he set up a controlled experiment to prove his theory. Several things contribute to the survival of a painting in a fire: the stage of the fire in the room, what was actually burning, and at what point did the firefighters engage. Even more importantly is, what is it made of? According to Gollner, hard particle board is almost fireproof, making them extremely unlikely to burn even in a room full of fire. The way the picture was mounted could also contribute to the picture surviving the fire. In a room fire, the heat and gases rise, causing the items to flash and ignite above it. If the picture had a string hanger and the string burned, causing the picture to fall to the ground amidst the cooler air, it might survive the fire. And if it fell face down, the picture itself would even be further protected by the insulation of the frame, making it even harder to ignite, because fire does not burn downwards, it burns upwards. He explains that the curse is a mere coincidence. Over 50,000 paintings and fires that happen every day make the likelihood of discovering an intact painting in the fire very likely. Now, ultimately, the decision of curse or coincidence falls to the individual. Even with the cold glare of light of science shining on the story, many still believe in the curse. The power of suggestion is frequently stronger than science. The power behind the curse comes from the telling of the story. Kelvin McKenzie, genius editor of The Sun, is also known as the father of the crying boy curse. Now, Kelvin McKenzie granted an interview to a journalist who thought it would be funny to bring along a picture of the crying boy. Yeah, McKenzie was not amused. He agreed to complete the interview, but only if the painting remained on the porch and was not brought inside his home. McKenzie stated that he absolutely believed that the curse was real. Now, Alan Wilkerson, the fireman we mentioned at the beginning of the story, Alan Wilkerson, the fireman who documented over 50 fires, proclaimed disbelief in the curse. However, when he was presented with a framed print of the crying boy at his retirement party, he politely declined the gift. Now, in the paranormal world, cursed objects, possessed dolls, and even eerie paintings whose eyes seem to follow you from room to room are not uncommon. Stephen King released the book Firestarter on September 29th of 1980 about a little girl who could start fires with her mind. And in his book, he actually is responsible for coining the term pyrokinesis to describe the girl's ability. So if you're about pyrokinesis, that is Stephen King's word, and it is a word that is used to describe that ability to this day. Now, fact or fiction, curse or coincidence, accident or intent, we might never know for certain. Prints of the crying boy can still be found on the internet. If you're daring enough to bring him into your home, please take precautionary measures. Treat the picture well. Speak kindly to him. And maybe hang a companion crying girl print next to him so he isn't lonely. And make double sure you have fire insurance, because it's just a picture, right? I mean, it's creepy, but it won't harm you, right? But it might just burn down your house.
Yeah, how about no?
Shelly said, hang a picture of a crying girl.
That was actually one of the things that they said might,
that's what they suggested,
that might offset the bad luck of the crying boy, is to hang a picture, because there were crying boys and crying girls. But the crying girl ain't no problem with her. She behaves. It's this little shit that runs amok.
I mean, you know, I'm going to be more on the scientific side of this, but I'm not going to tempt fate. Why have it if if it's linked possibly to some of this stuff?
Exactly. Now, I have to tell you, I left out one little story and blurb in there, because literally when you start looking at all of these stories that were sent into the Sun, and not only the Sun, the Sheffield Star got some. There were all over the region. Local newspapers were getting reports from people. Probably my favorite that I found was that a male stripper's fire eating act went terribly wrong after he taunted his wife's crying boy painting.
Oh my God.
I didn't put that one in there. I figured I'd save that till the end.
That's a hell of a headline.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm going to say it's not really a curse, because you said there were two different paintings that were linked.
Were 60 paintings. It is funny because every time the Star ran a picture of the family, that was holding a print, the print was different. And so it wasn't just Amadio or Bragolin, whichever one you want to call him. It wasn't just his prints. It was Zenkejian's prints.
Yeah, the Scottish artist.
Yes, Anna Zenkejian. It was her prints too. Any child crying basically was hanging in a house.
First off, why do you want to have a picture of a kid crying hanging on your wall?
That was one of the main questions that I kept seeing pop up over and over in articles. Why would you want a picture? Now, probably the most famous one is in that one that's on the trash heap, or actually, I think it was the last picture we showed. That's probably the most famous one. That's the one that I think everybody probably knows the best. Now, something that was stated about this picture is that if you look at this child's face, one side is very dark and the other appears to have an orange glow, almost as if he's standing in front of a fire. So this one, that's kind of why this one kind of is the poster child, for lack of a better word, for these cursed paintings. This is the one you see the most often, but the fires were not exclusively caused when this painting hung in the house. Any picture of the crying children seemed to cause the fires.
Yeah. You had the one fire that was started by the guy who was making French fries.
He made frying
with this fire daddy.
He got a great fry. Yeah.
And then think about too, a lot of these houses in England, they've been around for a long time. So the wiring may not be the best. And then when you have these paintings that are made of particle board or whatever material they're made of, they're really hard to ignite, because the intensity of the fire can also cause, it can also be whether or not the painting, goes up in flames.
Right.
So I'm just going to say, I think whatever the painting is, it was made of some sort of, like you said, like the fire retardant varnish and the poster board. So it makes it hard for it to burn. So I don't necessarily think that it's really a curse either, because these are all different prints as well. So why are all of these different prints a cursed painting? I don't know.
So you'd like one for Christmas, is what
I would
saying.
not. No, I said I didn't say.
Why
did
not?
Say, though, I don't want to tempt fate.
But it's science, Ryan. It is science, my friend.
But
You'll be all right.
I also don't want a picture of a crying child in my house. I think I'm good on that.
Shelly, we're gonna get him a 16 by 20 on pressed particle board.
Hell yes.
Hell yes. It won't beat burn you with that paint.
Now, Ryan, you actually are right on about some of the houses. And you got to remember, some of these houses are like, 300, 400, 500 years old. It's like some of these houses are very, very old. And some of them had to be retrofitted for appliances that could have caused fires. Some of them had electricity added that they never had electricity. That could be a source for the fire. And some of them actually probably still had thatched roofs. Because, these beautiful English countrysides with these beautiful thatched roof cottages, that also is not necessarily lending itself to fire safety.
No.
So now it also has, I saw it discussed about, like, I think you were right on about the case of mass hysteria. Because the more it printed and the more that the stories ran, and again, this was 6 weeks of these stories being told.
Yeah.
Every day there was someone else's a tale of woe and terror based on a crying child, up to and including people dying, because they had this picture in their house. So that leads you to question, everybody's heard of the placebo effect, right? Where in a control group, one person is given actual medicine, another person is given a sugar pill. The person that takes the sugar pill somehow or another seems to get better as well. Well, that's the placebo effect. Now, there's an opposite effect of that called the nocebo effect, which is the thought of if you anticipate bad things happen.
Right.
So could this be a case of the nocebo effect? I expect this painting to catch on fire in my house, so now it does, kind of like manifesting it. So the opposite of the placebo effect. So
the tulpa.
Right.
I blame the aliens.
You blame the aliens?
Yep. That's my theory. It's a tulpa brought in by the aliens.
I mean, if you look at this week's episode and last week's episode, one thing is for sure: the British tabloids do not let the truth get in the way of a good story.
No, they do not. And I also found it interesting that the editor's name was Kelvin McKenzie. Kelvin is a measurement of heat.
Oh, you're right.
I didn't even think about that.
I didn't think about that either.
That's a really good point.
I found the synchronicities I found interesting.
Okay, so here's my thing. Kind of combining what I said earlier and what you're saying now with this placebo effect, plus, the mass hysteria and all that stuff. If you're thinking it and it happens, is that not in a way some type of a curse or tulpa or egregore effect? If
you're manifesting,
it to happen, so therefore it happens because you're freaking out because you're like, fuck, I got this painting of this little orphan dude crying and my house is going to burn down, and your husband goes to make chips in his chip fryer fry daddy pan.
In his fry pan, his chip pan. Yeah.
And he burns the house down.
And two, if you come in there with that intention, all of a sudden, if any little weird thing that happens, you're going to start chalking up to whatever, that painting.
See, it's so okay. So then my question is, my question is at that point, like, are you giving it the power to be able to do it? So again, this is where my brain goes, because I'm like, you know what? Okay, yes, there's a scientific reasoning behind it. I get that. But if all these people and all this mass hysteria is happening and they're like, oh my God, my house is going to burn down. And all of a sudden, poof, your house goes up in smoke. Did you give it that power? Is there then a paranormal or supernatural aspect to it? Not just you owning the picture.
But there could be. I mean,
this is why I love curse objects.
It's like what we've talked about several times. If you have so many people focusing their intent on something,
that's what I'm saying.
That's
what I'm saying. Manifest. And if you have the tabloids, the media, who is printing this crap and causing all this mass hysteria, all this focus to be on these pictures, to be on this story, and then all of a sudden, boom, there goes, Mary's house, and then boom, there goes.
And the Sun was the #1 paper in England. It was read by damn near everybody.
Because it's one thing, like, it's one thing Sorry, I get off on this shit.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine.
I mean, on multiple ways I get off on this. Take that for what you want, dirty or not. But like seriously, okay, so you have the painting, scientific reason behind it, why it will not burn. But what's causing the fires, other than human carelessness? Other than they just need to teach a class back then on how to work a fry daddy or a chip pan or a bed
and
pan,
how to
whatever the fuck
install a
it's called.
smoke detector and how not to fall asleep with a cigarette in your mouth and how to not put a heater right next to a cover on a bed.
I don't know. I don't know. Do you believe? I don't know if I believe it's cursed. I believe that it's got to be something with the thought. You're like, I own this fucking painting, and my house is going to burn down, and then boom, your house burns down.
And from the firefighters' perspective, where they were talking about how they went to respond to all these houses that had all of these paintings. Well, the painting was mass produced, so more than likely, if everybody bought the painting in 1970,
it was very likely it was going to be there. And they basically sold these paintings pretty much up until 1985, whenever the Sun ran with this story.
We got fire elementals having a field day.
Yes, they were. I like that answer.
Thanks, Jenny, for that. That's pretty good.
I like that one. I don't know. Let's go with that. The fire gods were angry. Yes, I'm all about that.
I'm gonna go. Sorry, I just scratched my nipple on live air, but that's all right. Anyways, I'm gonna have to go with it. I don't know what I don't know if it's the painting themselves or if it is this mass hysteria mixed with some type of manifestation of some sorts, because we say it all the time, speak it into the universe and it will happen. Well, if you got all these people that are like, my house is going to burn down, then poof, your house burns down, and then all of a sudden, they're on the 6 o'clock news going, I just don't know what happened. Oh, that painting.
So let me equate it to this. You know how whenever there's a skeptic that comes on an investigation and suddenly something happens and now they're a believer. I think I'm going to go with curse because I don't want anything to try and convince me.
Well, I don't think you also have pictures of crying children hanging in your house. No, I don't.
Either, that's morbid.
Okay, so I do have to say this because this was brought up by Chad earlier in the comments that Zach Bagans' museum, he believed that it had a fire as well in it, and I couldn't remember. I thought I remembered hearing something like that, so I just Googled it. Apparently, there was a man who started a fire at his museum. Wasn't that his fire had I guess his fire had a museum at that point, but it didn't burn or anything like that. Obviously, I guess a man started a fire at his museum. So that's kind of interesting that the building per se didn't burn.
I actually neglected to write down when that episode aired. I realized that in reading it that I don't know when that episode aired of Deadly Possessions. So,
was the fire in the same room as the crying boy?
I don't believe so.
You're probably not going to get that much detail on it. They'll probably just say a lunatic started a fire in a museum in Las Vegas, Nevada.
Yeah. Pretty much. So I do find that interesting that maybe...
But I don't know if it was before or after the acquisition of the painting.
Oh, that's true. Well, that was no, it'd have to be after because that was dated 2022, and you're talking about season 1 of whatever of Deadly Possession. Deadly Possessions was on in 2015.
Season 1, episode 3.
Yeah, but Deadly Possessions was on way back in 13, 14, 15, something like that. So this article was written in 22.
If I still had my papers in order. But you see, I drop them.
Shelly throws them on the ground. Like this. She just does like this, and
makes it rain.
I just drop them on the ground. I was okay. It was. Oh, look at that! I just happened to pick it up to the exact right page. It was on season 1, episode 5 of Deadly Possessions. If you look up what that air date was, you can see whether or not that's when she gave it to. I mean, they filmed it obviously.
Yeah.
But season 1, episode 5 of Deadly Possessions.
5, April 29th, 2016.
2016. When did the man start the fire? When was there a fire in 2022?
That article was written in October of 2022.
So it was after the painting was acquired. Interesting. Thank you, Chad Wandell.
It is interesting.
Yeah, now that is interesting.
It never gave a time frame. Some people said that they had owned the painting for years and then suddenly they had an issue. Some of them had bought it and had it for 6 months. Some of them had it for like weeks. You know, one man had it since 1953 and it didn't catch on fire. His house didn't catch on fire until 1978.
Damn.
There were so many. There were so many stories. So
yes, but see, as it was said in the comments, if it happens more than 3 times, that's not a coincidence.
I agree.
So
I don't know.
I think there's got to be something behind. Maybe not the painting itself. It's just the amount of energy that's being put.
The intention.
Yeah. That's being put behind the thought of this painting.
What I would be interested in is knowing that because Amadio painted more than 60 pictures of crying children, what percentage of child showed up in the houses that caught on fire? Because if there's one little fucker that suddenly is showing up more often, just take that one out of circulation. You might be all right. Excuse my language. Sorry, I forgot we're not on pre and post broadcast.
We an 18 plus show. It's all right.
18 plus.
Okay.
One little hell goblin causing all the chaos.
Yeah. So I don't think there's any way to know which one, if you can even quantify that.
But remember, too, it wasn't just his painting. There was another artist that made a crying boy painting, and all this stuff also followed that.
And she created, her series was called the collection. I can't remember. Anyway, she did also a series. She didn't just paint one. She painted several in a collection.
Mm-hmm.
So
maybe you should just not paint children crying in photos. Maybe that's the takeaway from this. If we have any artist people on this watching us right now, don't be painting pictures of crying children,
of sad children. Paint happy children.
I mean, think of all the like the torment and the sadness and all that crap that has to go into that painting, and then you're like, here, I'm going to sell this sadness so I can make a profit off the sadness of this child.
Well, it is rightly thought that an artist, whenever they're creating, is breathing life into their creation. Mm-hmm. And so if you're going to be creative, you should always try to be in a good mood when you're doing it just old wives' tale. Be happy if you're happy when you cook, your food is supposed to taste better. You know, if you cook when you're angry, your dish is going to turn out awful. It's just all these little old wives' tales and stuff.
Well, I mean, it kind of just follows that same line. What intent are you using when you're making something like that? And if you're...
Which means I got to throw out a bunch of my pictures, because that's the way I get a lot of stress out. Is I get pissed off and I go sling paint. That makes me very happy. I do.
No, I mean, that's why all my meals from here on out are going to taste horrible, because I freaking hate cooking them in there, like stirring the meat. And I'm like, I could flipping DoorDash this shit. And that's why all my food tastes bad.
Brown motherfucker.
Well, gentlemen, final thoughts on the crying boy. Fact, fiction, curse, or coincidence?
Aliens. All about the aliens. No, my final thoughts is I don't think the series or the picture of these crying children itself are cursed. No. I think there has to do more with, if you're going to look into a paranormal or supernatural aspect to it, I think there has to do a lot more with the thought form behind it, the manifestation of the fires, that some little hell goblin is running around lighting houses on fire, you know. So that's what I'm going to go with. I don't think it's necessarily the painting. I just think it's the manifestation of the fires.
Okay.
I think on the paranormal element, Blake, I think that you're right as far as that goes. But as far as the scientific element goes, I think it's, like I said, it's got some sort of flame retardant material. It's really hard for it to catch on fire. So I think maybe that is why the paintings were unburned. But
that is why the paintings were unburned. Yeah. They prove it. Have proven it.
Yeah.
Good job for paying attention, Ryan.
I was. I'm saying that's why they're unburned. You know,
Michael Goldner proved it.
Yeah. Scientifical. If we're going the scientific route. But yeah, I don't want to test fate. I don't want to buy one. I don't want to have one hanging in my house. But
we're still unsure 3 years later why we put Ryan on the screen.
You're going with coincidence. You're going with coincidence?
Yeah.
Both of you?
No, I'm going with like a manifestation. of some sorts.
You're going with intent.
I don't.
Okay.
I think I'm going more along the lines of intent. I don't think this shit's coincidence. You got too many of these damn fires where these pictures are associated with, not causing it, but just mass hysteria, people thinking it. That can't be coincidence. I'm sorry. There's some manifestation intent behind it.
Okay. Well, my final thought is that I really love this story, and there will never be a crying child in a picture hanging in my house. I believe in the curse. I believe that it absolutely could be cursed.
You think it is cursed?
I do believe it is cursed. I believe that the sadness of the children, the fact that it's such a sad painting, I believe that can prey on your mind walking by it every day. And I think that you could, in fact, get the nocebo effect, where suddenly, because you're seeing something sad every day, you begin to get down and suddenly things begin to happen. So, yeah, I'm not having one in my house. I like puppies and butterflies. So,
well, you know what? I'm going to have beautiful puppies and butterfly wrapping around. Bam! That photo right there.
I'll beat your ass. And on that note, why don't you tell them everything they need to know, Blake?
All right, sounds good. Well, a couple announcements here. After Dark with EVP season 2. There we go. Let me get that right. After Dark with EVP season 2 will premiere exclusively on Paraflix Paranormal Plus on March 28th, 2024. And in my notes, I wrote 29/24. That's funny. 2024 at 7 p.m. All of season 1 is now streaming on Paraflix Paranormal Plus with our paranormal interviews and evidence you won't see anywhere else but that platform. Paraflix it is available on Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, iOS, and Google Play. Make sure you use our link to sign up, which will be posted to our Facebook page Wednesday morning and is also in the show notes for you audio listeners. Use the code AFTERDARK25 for 25% off your annual subscription. Wednesday morning, we are going to post that Linktree link to our Facebook, so make sure you head over there and check that out. That is going to include all of the links that you need to get to wherever you want to get for everything vaguely paranormal, including Paraflix Paranormal Plus, our social media channels. We're on every single one of them, our online merchandise store, our public investigations, and our Patreon page. Our Patreon page is the fastest and easiest way you can directly help support the show. For just $5 a month, you will gain access to over 350, I think now, additional Patreon exclusive videos. Your support from this goes directly to the show and all the ghostly adventures that we get to bring you week after week. This price will never change. And with that, you currently get our pre and post broadcast, which is the 30 minutes before and the 30 minutes after this live broadcast, where we discuss things further, fight, debate, act stupid, share horrible nicknames of ourselves. Why I did that tonight, I don't know. And just show a lot more personal side of things and what we truly believe. So our it also includes our Patreon exclusive raw and unedited investigation footage. We've recently been posting up a lot of that, and y'all are enjoying going to watch that. So we're going to be putting some more out. So if you've ever wanted to review our raw and unedited footage, now's your chance. That's only on Patreon. And we are offering that 7-day free trial for anyone who wants to check it out before you purchase. Make sure you're following us across all our social media platforms so you can get all the up-to-date information on everything vaguely paranormal. If you're just following us on one channel, you're only getting a small portion. These are all the ways you can help directly support everything vaguely paranormal, but we also appreciate your love and support for us through those likes, comments, shares, views, and downloads. And remember, as always, any questions, comments, or stories you'd like to share with us, those can be submitted to us at theevppod@gmail.com. That is THEEVPPOD@gmail.com.
Like, share, and subscribe. So we want to thank you guys for joining us tonight on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Thank you for being here. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Later.